Commander Velis stood at the center of the Akoth Council chamber, arms crossed behind her back. Towering walls of black metal curved high above the assembly hall, while holographic data screens floated in the air like glowing ghosts. Their blue light reflected from her armored skin, making her look even more imposing. She was a warrior born, an Akoth, a species feared across dozens of star systems. Natural armor plates protected her shoulders and arms. Powerful muscles rested beneath skin strong enough to stop small-caliber projectiles. Scars from ancient battles decorated her body like medals. The Akoth had conquered 17 star systems. Entire civilizations surrendered at the mention of their name. No one questioned Akoth's strength. No one questioned Akoth's supremacy. Which was exactly why Velis was bored. Very bored. A small intelligence officer named Plick stood nervously before the council. The tiny alien barely reached Velis's chest. His hands trembled as he adjusted the holographic display. "Commander," he began carefully, "our long-range observation stations have completed their analysis of the newly discovered species." Velis sighed. Finally. The report had already lasted 2 hours. Most of it involved trade routes, agricultural data, and atmospheric surveys. Things warriors did not care about. "What are they called?" Plick swallowed. "They call themselves humans." A new image appeared above the chamber. The planet Earth slowly rotated before them. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, an ordinary world in an unimportant corner of the galaxy. Several council members immediately lost interest. Velis almost joined them. Almost. "Humans originate from a world designated Earth," Plick continued, "located within a relatively isolated region of space." The image changed. Now human beings appeared. Male, female, different ages, different appearances. Velis stared, then blinked, then laughed. The sound echoed across the chamber. "Those are the warriors?" A few other council members laughed as well. The creatures looked absurdly fragile. They were barely 2 meters tall. No natural armor. No claws. No venom glands. No horns. No reinforced bone spikes. Nothing. Just soft skin and weak-looking limbs. One council member leaned forward. "They look unfinished." Another nodded. "Like prey animals." More laughter spread through the chamber. Velis studied a close-up image of a human face. Small teeth. Rounded features. Thin skin. A creature like that would last seconds in an Akoth training arena. "Explain why this species deserves council attention," Velis said. Plick cleared his throat. "Because our analysts believe humans may possess an unusually aggressive warrior culture." The laughter stopped. Not because anyone believed him, because they wanted to hear the explanation. Velis raised an eyebrow. "Those creatures?" Plick quickly manipulated the controls. The display changed. A rapid series of images appeared. Ancient battlefields. Soldiers, explosions, warships, tanks, historical records of human wars. "Our research indicates humans have spent a significant portion of their history engaged in organized conflict." The chamber grew slightly quieter. Many of their greatest leaders were military commanders. Another image appeared. "They celebrate warriors." Another. "They study famous battles." Another. "They continuously develop new weapons." Velis frowned. That part was unusual. Most species abandoned warfare after reaching spaceflight. Humans seem to have turned it into an art form. Plick continued. "The most concerning discovery involves their entertainment." "Entertainment?" Velis asked. "Yes, Commander." The intelligence officer looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Our analysts reviewed thousands of human media files." The screen changed again. A title appeared. "Movies." Then another. "Television." Then another. "Video games." Explosions filled the hologram. Battles. Alien invasions. Massive wars. Soldiers fighting impossible odds. Entire planets under attack. Humans cheering while watching it all. The council members exchanged confused looks. One elder warrior finally spoke. "They watch warfare. For fun? Apparently. Velis leaned forward. Now she was interested. Plick continued. Many human stories involve impossible situations. The display showed a small group of soldiers facing overwhelming enemies. They admire individuals who continue fighting despite impossible odds. Another image appeared. A damaged spacecraft attacking a fleet 100 times its size. They celebrate sacrifice. Another. A lone human standing against monsters. They admire defiance. The chamber slowly grew silent. The laughter had disappeared. Not because the humans looked dangerous, but because they looked strange. Very strange. Most intelligent species spent centuries trying to avoid war. Humans seemed obsessed with imagining new ones. Finally, Velis spoke. If they enjoy violence so much, why haven't they destroyed themselves? Plick hesitated. Then he brought up the final report. Actually, Commander, the small alien looked nervous. According to our historical records, he zoomed in on human history. They almost did. The chamber fell silent. Several council members leaned forward. For the first time since the briefing began, nobody was bored anymore. Because suddenly, the humans were no longer amusing. They were a mystery. A species with no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. Yet somehow, they had survived themselves. Several council members began to wonder if humanity had come prepared for far more than a simple argument. The transport shook as it entered the atmosphere. Ji-won looked at his squad leader, Lieutenant Min-ho, who gave him a reassuring nod. They had trained together for years. They had survived wars on Earth. But this was different. This was competing against aliens who could probably tear them apart. The ship landed in a massive arena complex. When the doors opened, the heat hit them like a wall. Ji-chuan walked down the ramp with his unit, and his mouth fell open. The arena was carved from a mountain. It could hold millions of spectators. Energy shields shimmered in the air, and holographic displays floated everywhere. But what really caught his attention were the other warriors. A group of Arathi stood nearby. They were 9 feet tall, with skin that looked like polished stone. Their bodies were covered in natural armor that humans would need tanks to penetrate. One of them glanced at the humans and laughed a sound like boulders grinding together. Beyond them, the Draviks sharpened their weapons. They had forearms and moved with a grace that seemed impossible. Their eyes tracked movement faster than anything Giwan had ever seen. The Venari didn't even have physical bodies, not completely. They shifted between solid and smoke, their forms never quite stable. They were telepaths, able to read minds and predict movements before they happened. And then there were dozens of other species, beings made of metal, creatures that floated without wings, warriors that towered over everyone else. Jiwan felt very small and very human. He was 5'9". He weighed 170 pounds. His rifle was powerful by Earth standards, but primitive compared to the plasma weapons and energy blades he saw around him. His armor would stop bullets, but he doubted it would do much against these opponents. A Kelvar official approached the gathered warriors. The Kelvar looked almost human, except their skin had a slight purple tint, and their eyes were solid violet without whites. The official was tall, and spoke in a language that their translation devices converted to English. Warriors, you honor us with your presence. The grand trials will test everything you are. Strength, speed, intelligence, courage. Only the finest will survive. Princess Yuna will observe from the royal pavilion. She will choose from among the victors. The official gestured to a structure high above the arena. Even from this distance, John could see a figure standing there watching them all. Princess Yuna, the woman who would choose her future husband from this crowd of warriors. Jiwan had seen her picture during the briefings. She was beautiful by any standard, human or alien. But more than that, she was the commander of the Kelvar Imperial Fleet. She had won battles against enemies across the galaxy. She wasn't just some princess waiting in a tower. She was a warrior herself. The official continued explaining the rules. The trials would last weeks. Many challenges would test them. Combat survival, strategy, and more. Warriors could die in these trials. It had happened before. They had all signed agreements accepting this risk. As the officials spoke, Jiwan noticed more aliens arriving. The crowd grew larger. Some warriors sized each other up. Others meditated or trained. A few made alliances, species that knew each other, forming groups. The humans stood alone. No one approached them. A few aliens pointed at them and seemed to be laughing. One warrior, a massive creature covered in spikes, walked past them and deliberately knocked into Minho. The lieutenant stumbled but said nothing. What could he say? They were the smallest fish in a very big pond. Night fell on Kelvar Prime. The warriors were shown to their quarters. Jiwan lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow the trials would begin. Tomorrow he would have to prove that humans belonged here. He thought about his training. 7 years in special forces, missions in jungles, deserts, and cities. He had survived situations where survival seemed impossible. But those were human conflicts, human enemies. This was different. Still, humans had one advantage. They were good at adapting, good at finding ways to win when they shouldn't. It wasn't much, but it was something. Jiswan closed his eyes and tried to sleep. He would need his strength. The grand trials were about to begin, and the galaxy was watching. The first trial was announced at dawn. Survival on Veros, a desert moon orbiting Kelvar Prime. The temperature would reach 200 degrees during the day. It would drop below freezing at night. Deadly creatures hunted there. The warriors had to survive for 3 full days and nights. 300 warriors boarded transport ships. Jishwan watched as the Arathi warrior named Kravik stretched his massive arms. The stone-like alien seemed unconcerned. His natural armor would protect him from heat and cold. Many warriors had similar advantages. Jiwan checked his gear, a survival kit, water purification tablets, a thermal blanket, basic tools, his rifle and ammunition. It wasn't much, but it was what humans had always worked with. Not the best equipment, just enough to survive if you were smart about it. The ships dropped them in different locations across Varos. Jiwan's boots hit red sand. The heat was immediate and crushing. His armor's cooling system kicked in, but he knew it would drain his battery quickly. He needed to find shelter fast. The landscape was nothing but rocks and sand dunes. In the distance, he saw cliffs. Cliffs meant caves. Caves meant shade and protection. He started walking, conserving his energy. Around the moon, other warriors took different approaches. The Arathi simply walked through the heat, their bodies handling it naturally. The Drak moved quickly, covering ground with their superior speed. The Venari shifted to energy forms that weren't affected by temperature. Jiwan reached the cliffs after 2 hours. Sweat soaked his uniform despite the cooling system. He found a shallow cave and went inside. It was cooler, but not by much. He sat down and thought about his situation. He couldn't survive 3 days by fighting the environment with strength. He had to work with it. He studied the cave carefully. Small cracks in the walls, air flowing through them. That meant deeper passages. He explored further and found a larger chamber deeper in the cliff. It was significantly cooler there. Good. That solved the heat problem during the day. Now he needed water and food. Jishwan spent the afternoon exploring. He found signs of creatures living in these cliffs. Tracks in the sand, droppings, bones. He studied them carefully. The bones were from smaller animals. That meant predators, but also prey. Where there was prey, there was a food chain. Where there was a food chain, there was water. He set traps using wire from his kit. Simple snares placed near the tracks. Then he found a high position and waited. As the sun set and temperature dropped, creatures emerged. They looked like 6-legged lizards, each about the size of a large dog. They were adapted to this environment. One of them triggered his snare. Gaiwan killed it quickly with his knife. He butchered the creature using every part. The meat would feed him. The hide could be used for better insulation. The bones could be sharpened into tools. Nothing was wasted. On the second day, Gaiwan heard sounds of combat in the distance. He climbed to a high point and looked through his rifle scope. He saw Kravik, the Arathi warrior, surrounded by larger predators. They looked like the small lizards, but grown to the size of trucks. Thermal serpents, the briefing had called them. Kravik was strong, and his armor was tough, but there were too many serpents. They were fast and worked together like a pack. The Arathi was in trouble. Gaiwan didn't have to help. This was a competition, but he thought about the wars he had fought on Earth. About the soldiers who had saved his life when they didn't have to. About doing the right thing even when it was stupid. He aimed carefully and fired. His rifle cracked across the desert. One thermal serpent fell, then another. The pack turned, confused about where the shots were coming from. It gave Kravik the opening he needed. The Arathi warrior smashed 2 more serpents and retreated to cover. Jiwan pulled back before they could locate him. He returned to his cave and waited. The 3rd day was the hardest. His water was running low despite his rationing. The heat seemed worse. His body was exhausted from 2 nights of light sleep, always alert for predators. But he had survived. He had adapted to this environment. When the extraction ships arrived, Jiwan walked out of his cave. He was dirty, tired, and hungry, but he was alive. He looked around at the other pickup zones. Many were empty. Warriors had died or given up. The thermal serpents had killed several. Heat exhaustion had taken others. The freezing nights had claimed more. Of 300 warriors who started, only 50 survived to be picked up. On the transport back to Kelvar Prime, Jiwan sat next to Minho, who had also survived. Across from them sat Kravik. The massive Arathi studied Jiwan for a long moment. "You fired those shots," Kravik said. His voice was deep like thunder. "You saved me." Jiwan shrugged. "Seemed like the right thing to do." "Why?" "This is a competition. I could eliminate you in later trials. Maybe. But today you needed help." "That's reason enough," Kravik nodded slowly. "You humans are strange. Weak bodies, simple weapons. But you survived. Not with strength, but with cleverness." The Arathi leaned back. "I will remember what you did." Back at the arena complex, the surviving warriors were shown their rankings. Jiwan had placed 12th overall. Not the highest, but far better than anyone expected from a human. The Arathi, Dravkuk, and Venari had taken most of the top spots, but Jiwan's name was there among them. In the royal pavilion high above, Princess Yuna reviewed the reports from the first trial. She had watched the surviving warriors. Most had performed as expected, using their natural advantages to overcome the challenges. But one warrior had caught her attention: the human. He had no natural armor, no superior strength, no special abilities. Yet he had survived by observing and adapting. He had fashioned tools from his environment. He had studied the ecosystem and used it to his advantage. And he had helped a competitor when he gained nothing from it. Princess Yuna marked his file for closer observation. The trials were just beginning, and this human was more interesting than she had expected. The next trials came quickly. The 50 surviving warriors faced new challenges, designed to test different skills. Combat in zero gravity, long-range marksmanship, tactical warfare simulations. Each trial eliminated more competitors. Each trial brought Jiwan closer to fights he shouldn't win. The Zeraravity Arena was a massive sphere, filled with floating platforms and obstacles. Warriors would fight one-on-one, until only the best remained. Jiswan drew his opponent randomly. A Venari named Kesla, the worst possible matchup for a human. The Venari could read thoughts. They sensed intentions before actions. Fighting them was like playing chess against someone who could see your next 10 moves. Every warrior who had faced a Venari so far had lost within minutes. Jiwan floated at his starting position. Across the sphere, Kesla's form shifted between solid and smoke. The Venari's voice entered his mind directly, skipping his ears entirely. "Human, I already know how this ends. I have seen your defeat in your own thoughts." The signal began. Kesla moved like liquid shadow, crossing the distance impossibly fast. G pushed off his platform, but the Venari was already where he was going. A strike hit his shoulder, spinning him. Another caught his leg. Kesla was reading his mind, seeing his plans before he executed them. Jiwan couldn't fight normally. Every technique, every strategy he thought about, the Venari saw at first. So Jan stopped thinking about fighting. He filled his mind with chaos, memories of training, his favorite songs, math problems, conversations with friends, random thoughts piled on random thoughts. He made his mind a storm of useless information with no pattern. Kesla hesitated. The Venari couldn't find Jaishwan's intentions in the noise. For the first time, the fight was even. Jiwan moved on instinct rather than planning. His body knew how to fight from years of training. He didn't think about punching. He just punched. He didn't plan his next move. He let his training take over. No thoughts for the Venari to read. It wasn't pretty. Jiwan took hits that would have ended the fight if he had been thinking clearly enough to feel the pain. But he landed hits too. In zero gravity, momentum mattered more than strength. Jiwan used it, pushing off surfaces at unpredictable angles. Kesla tried to adapt, but couldn't get into Jiwan's empty mind. The Venari grew frustrated. That frustration led to mistakes. Giwan caught Kesla during a shift between solid and smoke, hitting the Venari when the form was most vulnerable. Kesla slammed into a wall and didn't get back up. The match was over. The crowd was silent. Then the arena erupted in noise. Half the audience was cheering. The other half was protesting. A human had just beaten a Venari. It shouldn't be possible. In the royal pavilion, Princess Yuna leaned forward. She replayed the fight on her display. The human hadn't won through strength or speed. He had won by making his greatest weakness meaningless. If the Venari couldn't read his thoughts, they lost their advantage. It was brilliant in its simplicity. More trials followed. Jiwan continued winning fights he shouldn't. Against a Drovk swordmaster, he used the environment, turning it into a close-quarters fight where forearms became a disadvantage. Against a warrior with energy shields, he studied the recharge patterns and exploited the gaps. Some called his tactics dishonorable. He didn't fight properly. He used tricks and strategies instead of meeting his opponents directly. But the rules didn't say how to win, just that you had to win. After 2 weeks, only 10 warriors remained. Giwan, Kravik Theory, a Drovke named Vexa, 2 Kelvar nobles, including one named Silra, a cybernetic soldier named Teros, and 4 others. They were the best of the best from across the galaxy. The semi-final matches were announced. Giwan would face Kravik again. The warrior he had saved on the desert moon. The warrior who had thanked him and promised to remember. Now they had to fight. They met in a standard combat arena. Dirt floor, various obstacles for cover. No special conditions, just 2 warriors and their skills. Kravik bowed before the match. I hoped we would not meet until the end, human. You saved my life. For that I am grateful. But I cannot yield. My honor demands I fight with all my strength. Yuan nodded. I understand. Same here. The signal sounded. Kravik charged like an avalanche. His stone-like fist could shatter concrete. One hit would probably kill Jiwan. The human rolled and dodged, using his smaller size to stay away from those devastating strikes. But he couldn't dodge forever. Kravik was too skilled, too experienced. The Arathi had been fighting for longer than Giwan had been alive. Every time Giwan tried to create distance, Kravik closed it. Every shot Giwan fired bounced off that natural armor. Giwan's rifle clicked empty. He drew his combat knife knowing how useless it was. Kravik could probably bite through the blade, but Giwan kept moving, kept trying, kept looking for any weakness. The fight went on for an hour, then 2 hours. Giwan was bleeding from a dozen wounds. His armor was cracked. His body was past exhaustion, but he wouldn't stay down. Every time Kravik knocked him over, Giwan got back up. Kravik himself was breathing hard. His armor was chipped in places. Fighting for 2 hours straight was taxing even for an Arathi. He looked at the human with something like respect. Why do you not yield? You cannot win. Jijuan spat blood. Haven't lost yet either. They fought on. Jijuan's vision was blurring. His legs barely held him up. He couldn't feel his left arm anymore, but he kept moving, kept fighting, kept refusing to quit. Finally, both warriors collapsed at the same moment. Neither could stand. The medical teams rushed in. The judges reviewed the footage for an hour. Then they announced their decision. The match was a draw. Both warriors had fought beyond the limits of endurance. Both had shown exceptional skill and courage. Both would advance to the finals. In the medical bay, Jiwan lay in a healing pod while machines repaired his injuries. Kravik was in the pod next to him, also recovering. Human, the Arathi said. I have fought for 50 years. I have never faced an opponent like you. Not the strongest. Not the fastest, but the most stubborn. You simply refuse to lose. Jiwan managed a weak smile. It's kind of our thing. In her private chambers, Princess Yuna watched footage of the fight again. She had seen the other semi-final matches. Excellent technique, impressive power, strategic brilliance. But this fight was different. She had watched a human warrior refuse to accept defeat, even when defeat was inevitable. She thought about what the Empire needed. Power was easy to find. The galaxy had plenty of strong warriors. But this kind of determination, this absolute refusal to quit, that was rare. That was valuable. Princess Yuna made a note in her personal files. The finals were in 3 days. 5 warriors remained, and she was beginning to understand which one she wanted. The grand trials were complete. 5 finalists stood before the Empire. Kravik the Ori, representing pure strength and honor. Vexa the Drevik, a master of weapons with decades of training. Silra, a Kelvar noble whose family had served the throne for generations. Teros, enhanced with cybernetics that made him half machine. And G1, the human, who had somehow survived this far. Now came the second part of the tradition. Princess Yuna would observe each finalist outside of combat. She needed to understand their character, their minds, their hearts. A strong warrior could protect the empire, but a future ruler needed more than strength. The observation period began with a formal banquet. The finalists were presented to the Kelvar court. Thousands of nobles and officials gathered to see who might become their future prince. The hall was enormous, decorated with crystals that glowed with inner light. Servers brought food from 100 worlds. Musicians played instruments that created sounds impossible on Earth. Jiwan felt completely out of place. He knew how to field strip a rifle blindfolded. He knew how to survive behind enemy lines. He didn't know which fork to use at a formal dinner. The other finalists seemed comfortable. Silra especially, who moved through the crowd like he was born to it. He spoke to nobles with practiced ease, made alliances with influential families, promised things that Jiwan didn't fully understand, but sounded important. Bix had demonstrated her weapon skills, performing a traditional Dravkok dance that involved 4 blades moving in perfect harmony. The crowd applauded. Kravik spoke about honor and duty, about his people's long friendship with the Kelvar Empire. More applause. Teros displayed his cybernetic enhancements, discussing how such technology could strengthen the Empire's military. Nobles leaned in, interested. Then it was Gelan's turn to address the court. He walked to the speaking platform on stiff legs. Thousands of eyes watched him. He could fight trained killers without hesitation. But this was different. This was terrifying in a new way. He kept it simple. I'm Corporal Jiwan from Earth. I'm a soldier, not a politician. I don't have fancy genetics or ancient bloodlines. I can't promise you empires or perfect alliances. He paused, trying to find the right words. But I can promise I'll do my duty, that I'll stand when others fall, that I'll find a way forward when there isn't one. That's what humans do. We adapt, we persist. We never give up. The applause was polite but quiet. He had said the wrong things, too simple, too honest, not impressive enough for this crowd. Over the next week, Princess Yuna held private audiences with each finalist. She asked them about strategy, about governance, about their vision for the empire. Their answers revealed much. Silra spoke of expanding territory, of using his family connections to strengthen political power. He was intelligent and ambitious. He knew exactly how to increase the empire's influence. But Yuna noticed he spoke a lot about his own importance, his own achievements, his own bloodline. Vexa focused on military matters, on creating perfect warriors and conquering potential threats. Valid concerns, but narrow. The empire needed more than just military strength. Teros wanted to enhance everyone with technology, to create a society of perfect cybernetic beings. An interesting vision, but one that made Yuna uncomfortable. What would be lost if everyone became machines? Kravik spoke of honor and tradition of maintaining the old ways. Yuna respected this, but the galaxy was changing. The empire needed to change with it, or be left behind. Then Jiwan's turn came. Yuna met him in a private garden, away from the formal throne room. She wanted to see him as he really was, not performing for a crowd. Your speech at the banquet was different from the others, she said. You didn't promise power or conquest. Jiwan shrugged. I don't know how to promise those things. I'm good at solving immediate problems, at surviving bad situations. Big picture politics, that's not my area. Yet, you command respect from your fellow humans. I have read your military file. Your soldiers would follow you into certain death. That's different. In combat, people need someone who can make quick decisions and keep a clear head. Someone they trust to have their backs. And is that not what an empire needs? Someone who protects, who makes decisions under pressure, who others can trust. Jishwan thought about it. Maybe. I never thought about it that way. They walked through the garden in silence for a moment. The plants were alien to Jishwan, but beautiful. Some glowed softly. Others responded to movement, leaves turning to follow them. Why did you help Kravik on the desert moon? Ya asked suddenly. You gained nothing from it. You could have let him die and faced easier competition. He needed help. That was reason enough. So simple. Should it be complicated? But Jai-Shun stopped and looked at her directly. Your Highness, I've seen what happens when people only think about themselves. When winning is more important than doing right, it makes everything worse. Maybe that makes me stupid or naive, but I'd rather lose being decent than win being cruel. Princess Yuna felt something shift in her chest. The other finalists had told her what they thought she wanted to hear. Promises and plans and pretty words. This human just told her the truth. Simple, honest, uncomfortable truth. The Empire has many strong warriors, she said quietly. Many brilliant strategists. Many people with perfect bloodlines and powerful families. But strength fails. Plans fall apart. Bloodlines mean nothing if the person is weak inside. She looked at him. I think the Empire needs someone who will stand when things get difficult. Who will find solutions when there are none. Who will do the right thing even when it costs them. Jishimen met her eyes. That sounds like a lot of responsibility. It is. Could you handle it? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. Tired, but genuine. Probably not. But I'd try anyway. That's what humans do. We try, even when we probably can't succeed. Sometimes we surprise ourselves. That evening, Princess Yuna reviewed all her notes. She thought about each finalist, about what they offered, about what the Empire needed. Silra would bring political power and stability. Vexa would bring military excellence. Teros would bring technological advancement. Kravik would bring honor and tradition, all valuable things. But Giwan would bring something rarer, the ability to adapt, to persist, to find hope in impossible situations, to do what was right, even when it was hard. These were the qualities that built lasting empires, not just powerful ones. She made her decision. Tomorrow she would announce it to the Empire. She knew it would cause problems. The nobles would protest. Many would call her foolish for choosing a human over more obviously qualified candidates. But Princess Yuna hadn't become commander of the Imperial fleet by making easy choices. She had learned to trust her instincts to see value where others saw weakness. The human was her choice. Now she just had to convince the Empire that she was right. The Grand Hall filled with representatives from across the Kelvar Empire and beyond. Thousands of beings crowded into the massive space. Holographic displays showed the ceremony to billions more, watching across 300 star systems. This was the moment everyone had waited for. Princess Yuna would announce her choice. The 5 finalists stood in a line before the throne. Each wore formal attire from their respective cultures. Silra wore elaborate Kelvar robes that showed his noble status. Kravik wore ceremonial Orthi armor polished to perfection. Vexa carried traditional DVC blades. Teros's cybernetics gleamed. Giwan wore his dress military uniform. Simple compared to the others. But the best Earth had to offer. The betting had been fierce. Silra was the favorite. He was Kelvar, politically connected, and had performed well in the trials. Kravik was second choice, respected for his honor and strength. Vexa and Taros had their supporters. Giwan was barely mentioned. The human was an interesting story, but no one seriously believed the princess would choose him. Princess Yuna entered the hall. She wore armor rather than a dress, practical and elegant at the same time. This was a warrior princess, not a delicate flower. She had earned her position through skill and leadership. The crowd fell silent as she approached the throne. She didn't sit. Instead, she stood before it and addressed the gathered masses. Her voice was amplified across the hall, broadcast to the watching billions. I stand before you at a crossroads in our empire's history. The grand trials have shown us the finest warriors the galaxy has to offer. Each finalist represents excellence in different forms. Each could serve the empire well. She paused, her violet eyes sweeping across the crowd. I have seen warriors who could shatter planets with their strength, whose bloodlines stretch back thousands of years, whose power is beyond question. These things have value. They have always had value in our empire. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. This sounded like it was leading to Silra or Kravik being chosen. But I have also witnessed something else, something rarer, and perhaps more valuable. Princess Yuna's gaze moved to the finalists. I have seen a warrior who should not have survived yet did, who faced opponents far stronger yet found ways to win, who was knocked down again and again yet stood up every time. The crowd grew quieter, uncertain now where this was going. Strength is common in the galaxy. Power can be found on any world, but the ability to adapt, to overcome impossible odds, to refuse defeat, even when all logic says you should fail. That is rare. That is precious. Princess Yuna stepped forward directly in front of the finalists now, her eyes locked onto Gwan's. This is the human I want, Corporal Gwan of Earth. I will marry him. The hall erupted. Shouts of surprise, anger, confusion. The holographic displays showed similar chaos across the Empire. The human delegation sat frozen in shock. Gwan himself looked like he had been hit in the head. Silra stepped forward, his face twisted with fury. This is madness. You would choose this primitive over your own people, over me? My family has served the throne for 10 generations. Other voices joined his protest. Nobles shouted their objections. Even some who had seemed neutral were standing, gesturing angrily. Princess Yuna waited for the noise to die down. When it didn't, she raised her hand. Power radiated from her, a reminder that she was not just a princess, but a warrior who commanded fleets. The hall fell silent. My decision is made. This is not madness. This is clear vision. She addressed the crowd now, her voice carrying authority. You see his weaknesses. No natural armor. No superior strength. No ancient bloodline. You see what he lacks. She turned to look at Gwan, then back to the crowd. I see what he has. Ingenuity that turned the desert moon into his ally, while others simply endured it. A strategy that defeated a Venari telepath by making his greatest weakness irrelevant. Determination that fought an Arathi warrior to a standstill, despite being outmatched in every physical way. Honor that saved a competitor's life when it gained him nothing. The protests were quieter now, but still there. Princess Yuna continued. The galaxy is changing. New threats emerge. Old solutions may not be enough. We need more than strength. We need the ability to adapt, to find new answers to new problems. Humanity has shown us this ability. They went from primitive weapons to spaceflight in centuries, not millennia. They survived countless wars on their own world and emerged stronger. They adapt or they die, and they have chosen to adapt. Taros spoke up, his voice modulated by cybernetics. You would dilute the royal bloodline with inferior genetics. I would strengthen the royal bloodline with the genetics of survival. The Kelvar Empire has been strong for 10,000 years, but how many empires have fallen in that time because they refused to change? Because they believed their old ways were the only ways. Yuna's voice was fierce now. I will not let that happen to us. Vexa stepped forward, her forearms crossed. This is tradition. The grand trials have always chosen the strongest warrior, and Corporal Gwan proved himself in every trial. He earned his place among the finalists. Or do you claim the trials were unfair? Vexa had no answer to that. The human had won his matches, however unconventionally. Then Silra spoke again, his voice cold. I invoked the right of challenge. If the human is truly worthy, let him prove it in single combat against me. The crowd gasped. The right of challenge was ancient law, rarely invoked. Any finalist could challenge the chosen warrior to single combat. If the challenger won, they took the chosen's place. It was designed to prevent weak choices, to ensure only the truly strong could claim the position. Princess Yuna's face remained calm, but inside, she felt a flash of worry. Silra was formidable. He had Kelvar genetics, trained since childhood, equipped with the best weapons and armor the Empire could provide. Gwan was already exhausted from the previous trials. He had barely recovered from his fight with Kravik. But the law was clear. She could not refuse the challenge. She looked at Gwan. He had been silent through all of this, still processing that she had chosen him. Now he understood what was being asked. One more fight. Winner takes everything. Corporal Gwan. Princess Yuna said formally. Do you accept this challenge? Gwan looked at Silra. The Kelvar noble was taller, stronger, better equipped. Gwan was tired, still healing, and frankly overwhelmed by everything that was happening. He should say no. Any reasonable person would say no, but Gwan had never been good at being reasonable. I accept. The crowd's noise rose again. Silra smiled, confident in his victory. The other finalists looked at Gwan with a mixture of respect and pity. This human had come so far only to fall at the last moment. Princess Yuna kept her face neutral, but her hands clenched at her sides. She had chosen the human for good reasons, but now she had to watch him fight one more impossible battle. And this time, if he lost, she would lose him too. The duel was set for dawn the next day in the Imperial Arena. The entire empire would watch, and the future of the Kelvar throne would be decided by a single combat between a noble and a human who never should have made it this far. The night before the duel, Jiwan sat alone in his quarters. His body still ached from the previous trials. The medical pods had healed the serious damage, but exhaustion went deeper than torn muscles and broken bones. He had been fighting for weeks with almost no rest. Now he had to fight again, against someone fresh and ready. He didn't hear Princess Yuna enter. One moment he was alone. The next, she was standing in the doorway. She wore simple clothes instead of her armor. Without the formal attire, she looked younger, more human, though that was a strange thought. "You could withdraw," she said quietly. "I would understand. Silra will kill you if he gets the chance. He sees you as an insult to everything he believes in." Jiwan looked up at her. "Would you respect that choice? Me withdrawing?" She thought about it honestly. "No, I would not. Then I fight." He went back to cleaning his rifle. The familiar motions were calming. "Can I ask you something, Your Highness?" "Yes." "Why did you really choose me? I heard what you said to the crowd, but there's more to it, isn't there?" Princess Yuna sat down across from him. For a moment, she was just Yuna, not a princess, just a woman who had to make an impossible choice. The empire is strong, but it has been strong the same way for thousands of years. The same tactics, the same thinking, the same solutions to new problems. She looked at him. "When I watched you fight, you never did what was expected. You found new solutions. You adapted. That is what the empire needs, even if the empire does not know it yet. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person." "It is. Can you handle it?" Jiwan laughed, though it was tired. "Probably not, but I'll try." He paused. "You're taking a big risk on me." "I know, but the best decisions are usually risks. Safe choices rarely change anything." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Yuna stood to leave. "Jiwan," she said at the door, "I chose you because I believe in what you represent, but also because I believe in you. Do not die tomorrow. I would be very disappointed." He smiled. "I'll do my best." Dawn came too quickly. The Imperial Arena was packed beyond capacity. Every seat was filled. Holographic displays showed the duel to billions across the Empire. This was no longer just about choosing a consort. This was about tradition versus change, about the old ways versus new possibilities. The two fighters entered from opposite sides of the arena. Silra wore full combat armor in Kelvar royal colors, purple and silver. Energy shields shimmered around him. He carried two plasma blades that hummed with power. His equipment alone was worth more than Jiwan's entire military salary. Jiwan wore his standard combat gear, armor that could stop bullets but not plasma. His rifle with conventional ammunition, a combat knife, simple, basic, human. The crowd was clearly on Silra's side. He was one of them, defending their traditions. Jiswan was the outsider, the one who didn't belong. The judge explained the rules. Fight until one yielded was unable to continue or died. No interference from outside. No time limits. The winner would become Princess Yuna's chosen consort. Princess Yuna watched from the royal box, her face showing nothing, but her hands gripped the armrest hard enough to hurt. The signal began. Till removed fast, faster than a human should be able to. Genetic enhancements gave him speed and reflexes beyond what nature provided. His plasma blades cut through the air where G1 had been standing a moment before. G1 rolled, came up firing. His bullets sparked off Silra's energy shields. The Kelvar noble laughed. "Your primitive weapons cannot harm me, human. This ends quickly." Silra pressed the attack. The plasma blades were devastating. They cut through stone and metal like paper. One touch would slice through Jiwan's armor. The human was forced to retreat, dodging and weaving, using obstacles for cover. 5 minutes in, Jiwan was already bleeding from a glancing hit. 10 minutes in, his rifle was cut in half. 15 minutes in, he was running on pure adrenaline and desperation. The crowd was cheering for Silra. This was going exactly as they expected. The human had been lucky in the trials, but now he faced a true Kelvar warrior. It was only a matter of time, but Jiwan was watching, learning. Silra was skilled and powerful, but he was also arrogant. He believed he had already won. That confidence led to patterns. Silra favored his right side. His shields took a moment to recharge after blocking hits. His attacks followed combinations that were beautiful, but predictable. Jan stopped running. He moved closer instead, getting inside Silro's optimal range. The plasma blades were deadly at medium distance, but up close they were harder to use effectively. Jiwan pulled his combat knife, a pathetic weapon compared to plasma, but it was what he had. The fight became brutal. Close quarters, violent, desperate. Jiwan took hits that would have killed him if they landed fully. His armor was scored and melting in places, but he was landing hits too, finding gaps in the shields targeting joints in Silra's armor. Silra's confidence turned to frustration. The human should be dead. Why wasn't he dead? The noble increased his aggression, abandoning technique for raw power. And that was his mistake. Jiwan waited for an opening. When Silra overcommitted to a strike, Jiwan moved inside it. He grabbed Silra's wrist, controlling the plasma blade. With his other hand, he drove his knife into the gap where Silra's armor joined at the shoulder. Not a killing blow, but enough. Silra's arm went numb. The plasma blade fell from his grip. Jiswan kicked it away and put his knife to Silra's throat. Both warriors were gasping for air. Both were bleeding and exhausted, but only one had a blade at his throat. "Yay," Jiswan said. Silra's face showed a dozen emotions. Rage, disbelief, shame. He had been certain of victory. His pride screamed at him to keep fighting. But the blade was at his throat, and the human's eyes were serious. If he didn't yield, Jiwan would kill him. The silence in the arena stretched. Then quietly, Silra spoke. "I yelled." Jiwan pulled back and nearly collapsed. His legs barely held him. Medics rushed into the arena to tend both fighters. The crowd was stunned into silence. Then slowly, the cheering began. Not all of them, but enough. The human had won. Impossible, but true. In the royal box, Princess Yuna allowed herself to breathe again. Her gamble had paid off. The human had proven himself one more time. Silra was helped to his feet by the medics. Before leaving the arena, he stopped in front of Jiwan. The Kelvar noble looked at him for a long moment. "I underestimated you," Silra said. "That was my failure. You fought well, human." He didn't sound happy about it, but he meant it. Jiwan nodded, too tired to speak. As Silra left, Kravik entered the arena. The massive Orthi warrior approached Jiwan and extended his hand. Jiwan shook it small and pale against Kravik's stone-like grip. "You have won," Kravik said. "Not with strength, but with something better. You have won with spirit. I am honored to have fought you." Vexa approached next. All four arms crossed in a traditional Dravek sign of respect. Even Taros gave a small nod of acknowledgement. The trial by combat was over. G had survived. He had won his place. And now came the hardest part. Actually living up to the choice Princess Yuna had made. As the medics helped him out of the arena, Jiwan looked up at the royal box. Princess Yuna was standing watching him. She didn't smile. That would be improper in public. But her eyes said everything. She had chosen correctly. Now they just had to prove it to the Empire. The wedding was set for 1 month after the trials. 1 month for Jiwan to heal, to learn basic Kelvar customs, and to prepare for a life he never imagined. 1 month for the Empire to accept what had happened. 1 month for Earth to process that one of their soldiers was about to marry an alien princess. The diplomatic implications were staggering. Earth went from being a minor newcomer in galactic politics to having direct ties to one of the most powerful empires. Trade agreements were suddenly fast-tracked. Technology exchanges that would have taken decades happened in weeks. The Kelvar Empire wanted to understand humanity better now that a human would be part of the royal family. But for Jiwan, those first weeks were about much simpler things, like learning which fork to use at formal dinners, how to bow to visiting dignitaries, the difference between the 17 types of court greeting. He was terrible at all of it. "No, no," the protocol instructor said, for the 100th time. "You bow at 30 degrees for a duke, 45 for a high duke, 60 for a prince of the realm." Jiwan rubbed his face. "What if I just treat everyone the same?" The instructor looked horrified. "That would be deeply insulting to everyone involved." Princess Yuna, watching from the doorway, couldn't help but smile. She dismissed the instructor and entered the room. "You do not have to be perfect," she said. "They will make allowances. You are human. Different customs. I don't want allowances. I want to do this right." Jiwan sat down heavily. "You're taking enough risk choosing me. I don't want to make it worse by being ignorant." Yuna sat beside him. Over the past weeks, they had spent more time together, learning about each other's worlds. She told him about the Kelver Empire's history, the political complexities he would face. He told her about Earth, about humanity's wars and struggles, and eventual reach for the stars. They had become friends. That was important. The marriage was political and strategic, but friendship was something real they could build on. Tell me about your family. Yuna said it was something they hadn't discussed yet. Jiwon was quiet for a moment. My parents died when I was young. I was raised by my grandmother. She taught me to work hard, to be honest, to help people when I could. He smiled sadly. She would have liked you. She always said I should find someone smarter than me. That is a low bar, Yuna teased gently. He laughed. It felt good to laugh. She died 3 years ago. I wish she could see this. Her grandson marrying a princess. She wouldn't believe it. I wish I could have met her. She raised someone remarkable. The wedding ceremony combined Kelvar and human traditions. Yuna wore traditional royal armor polished to perfection. Jiwon wore his military dress uniform with Kelvar royal colors added. The ceremony was broadcast across both the Empire and Earth. Billions watched as two very different worlds joined through marriage. There were still protesters. Kelvar nobles who believed the bloodline was being weakened. Human groups who thought Jan was abandoning his own kind. But there were also supporters. People who saw this as a bridge between civilizations, a chance for something new. After the wedding came the real work. Jiwon's role was not just symbolic. Princess Yuna, now elevated to Empress, gave him real responsibilities. She valued his different perspective, his human way of thinking. The first test came 3 months after the wedding. A rebellion broke out in the outer territories. 3 systems were refusing to pay imperial taxes, claiming the Empire ignored their needs. The standard response would be military force. Crush the rebellion. Remind everyone of the Empire's power. Empress Yuna asked Jiwon to investigate before any decisions were made. He took a small team to the rebel systems. No military presence, just observation. What he found was different from what the report said. The rebels weren't criminals or traitors. They were farmers and miners, people who had been overtaxed and ignored for decades. Their grievances were legitimate. The Empire had been taking resources without giving anything back. They were desperate, not evil. Jiwon reported this to Yuna. Military force would work short-term. You'd crush them easily, but the problem would come back. The real issue is, they feel abandoned by the Empire. What do you suggest? Address their actual problems. Reduce their taxes to reasonable levels. Send engineers to help with infrastructure. Show them the Empire cares about more than just taking resources. He paused. It's not the strong choice. It's not the traditionally Kelvar choice, but I think it's the right choice. Yuna considered it. Her advisors argued against it. They said it would show weakness, encourage other rebellions, but she trusted Jiwon's assessment. She implemented his suggestions. The rebellion ended without a single shot fired. The outer systems returned to the Empire, but this time as partners rather than subjects. Other territories noticed. The Empire was changing, becoming something different under its new leadership. The second test came 6 months later. A plague broke out on a member world. The disease was unknown, spreading fast, and the traditional Kelvar medical approach wasn't working. Thousands were dying. Jiwon studied the problem with human doctors brought in to consult. The Kelvar approach was to treat the disease directly with advanced medicine. But the disease was adapting faster than the treatments. The human approach was different. Rather than just fighting the disease, they looked at why it was spreading so fast. Poor sanitation, overcrowding, contaminated water supplies. The solution was less advanced medicine and more basic infrastructure, clean water systems, better housing, quarantine procedures. Simple solutions that the Empire had overlooked because they were too basic. It worked. The plague was contained and eventually eliminated. The world recovered, and the Empire learned that sometimes the most advanced technology wasn't the answer. Sometimes the answer was human ingenuity and common sense. With each success, Jiwon earned more respect. Not from everyone, there were still plenty who resented him, but enough people saw the value he brought. He thought differently, approached problems from angles the Kelver hadn't considered. Empress Yuna had been right to choose him. 1 year after the wedding, the coronation ceremony was held. Yuna officially became Empress of the Kelver Empire. Jiwon became Prince Consort. It was a position no human had ever held. would have been unthinkable just 2 years ago. During the ceremony, Empress Yuna spoke to the assembled masses across the empire. When I chose my consort, many questioned my judgment. They saw only what he lacked compared to traditional candidates. They did not see what I saw. A warrior who represents not just his own strength, but the strength of his entire species. She turned to Jiwan standing beside her. He looked uncomfortable in the formal regalia. But he stood straight and proud. Humanity has shown us that power comes in many forms. The ability to adapt, to persist, to find hope in hopeless situations. These are not weaknesses. They are strengths. Perhaps the greatest strengths any civilization can possess. She addressed Jichuan directly. Now, I chose you not, despite your differences, but because of them. Together, we will lead the empire into a new era. An era where strength is measured not just by power, but by wisdom. Where tradition is honored, but not worshipped. Where change is embraced when it makes us better. The crowd erupted in cheers. Even many who had opposed the marriage initially were won over by the results they had seen. The empire was stronger now, more flexible, more capable of handling new challenges. Later that night, alone in their quarters, Jijuan and Yuna looked out over the capital city. Light stretched to the horizon, representing billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. "Do you regret it?" Jijuan asked. "Choosing me? The controversy? The criticism?" Yuna took his hand. Over the past year, their friendship had grown into something more. Respect had become affection. Partnership had become love. "No, never. You have been exactly what the Empire needed. What I needed," she smiled. "Though you still cannot remember which bow is for which rank," he laughed. "I just bow the same for everyone. Drives the protocol instructors crazy. I know. They complain to me constantly." They stood together in comfortable silence. A human and a Kelvar, a soldier and an empress, partners in leading an empire into an uncertain future. The Kelvar Empire would never be the same. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in the most unexpected way possible, and Corporal Jiwan, the soldier who never should have won the grand trials, had become Prince Jiwan, the human who changed an empire by simply refusing to give up. It was, as humans would say, one hell of a story, and it was just the beginning.